As Native Americans succumbed to unrelenting pressure from colonialism, many of their traditional lifeways were repressed and, in some cases, lost altogether. As the Nottawaseppi Huron Band of the Potawatomi of southern Michigan gain capacity through self-determination, they are restoring many traditional lifeways. This is their story of food sovereignty.
Good afternoon. My name is Douglas Taylor. I'm with the Nottawaseppi Huron Band of the Potawatomi, and I'm here to talk a bit about food sovereignty and what it means to our culture.
Food sovereignty is the right of a people to define their own food systems. This includes access to healthy, culturally appropriate food produced and distributed through ecologically sound and traditionally sustainable methods.
We knew the lay of the land, we knew the plants, how they bloomed, when they bloomed, how to process them and use them for food. So when the government come in and removed us, we lost our way of life. We lost our identity as far as knowing our food, our sovereignty, and how we survive off the land.
In the aftermath of the battles of the River Raisin, many Native communities were forcibly removed from their homelands and sent to new areas with vastly different natural resources.
So the government succeeded in basically isolating us from our way of life. We had learned over the years, being in the woodland areas that living in for generations, and now all of a sudden we're out west. We didn't know how the plants worked. We had to relearn everything, harvesting, foraging, all that stuff. We had to learn all over again. It was pretty hard. A lot has transpired since then. As a result of us being removed, keep all of our traditions and way of life, it's an ongoing process that we have to still work towards passing this traditions or information on to our next generation. When I was growing up, everything was a lot different cultural-wise, and not just on the reservation, but as a society. Back then, society was more family-oriented. A lot more families lived together. A lot of people had gardens. It was up to us to plant whatever we wanted: corn, squash, strawberries, potatoes, green beans. We grew up having to learn how to forage, identify plants that we could eat, knowing the habits of wildlife, the rabbits, the squirrels, the deer, all that. It wasn't a job, it was a way of life. Looking back at it, yeah, we were kind of poor, but we were happy and content, and we had food on the table that we could eat. This area right now is much different 50 or 60 years ago. It was a lot more open. We had prairie grass, and we used to play on the hill just on the other side of the res over there, and we'd run down the hill, and there's prairie grass up to your knees, and then at the bottom of the hill there was wild strawberries. And so we would sit down, like kids do, eat strawberries. That's the way it was. Little kid running around, eating, foraging, and we would make sure that the elders had food, because the way we looked at it, we got more than enough, so we would pass it out to ensure that the elders and the other neighbors had plenty of food to eat. That was another tradition, that you didn't have to be told to do that. That was expected of you, foraging and gathering foods, that you didn't just gather it for yourself. That would be selfish. That wouldn't be in good standing, that's not the seven grandfather teachings. We would always gather enough food for as many people as it could support at the time. And bearing in mind not exhausting the food supply that we were foraging from, there was a balance to that. Kind of paced it out. We'd go fish, one day, and then, we'd go do something else.
Beginning in the early 1800s and continuing through 1978, the U.S. government forcibly removed Native children from their families, sending them to boarding schools. The boarding schools not only limited the children's access to traditional knowledge from their elders, but the European-based diet caused new dietary illnesses such as diabetes and obesity.
When I was coming up in high school, the state come in and removed a lot of the kids. They became wards of the state and they were taken away from their traditions. There was only 4 kids left. I was on one end, the Raisin and Ruth Ann Bailey. She was on the other side, and everybody in between, all the kids that were my age, were gone. It was kind of devastating.
In December 1995, the United States government formally recognized the Nottawaseppi Huron Band of the Potawatomi as a sovereign nation.
We are now finally given the opportunity to be a sovereign nation, enabling us to bring back all of our traditions, our food sovereignty. One of our missions here in the Environmental and Tribal Historic Preservation Office, along with the Cultural Department and a lot of the other departments, is that we're a sovereign nation to govern as we see fit as a tribal nation. The main goal is that we bring back all these traditions and pass them on like our ancestors did, adhering to the 7 grandfather teachings, moving forward in a good way. Native Americans in general do not write things down. It's the elders sit down at night or during certain ceremonies, spring solstice, summer solstice, fall. That's all part of the traditions where the elders sit down and they pass on stories to the younger generation. In between these events, you actually do hands-on learning from the elders of how you forage your food, what type of plants that are good for medicines, the certain times of year that you pick them, and foraging. All that stuff is passed on by hands-on training. Thankfully for Potawatomis in the Great Lakes area, a lot of the tribes are federally recognized, and there's a lot of networking and coordination and sharing information. Not all the Potawatomis do everything the same. There's variations, foraging and gathering, and that's obviously because they live in different regions of the state. So even though there's a lot of similarities, there's still minor differences. But as a whole nation, to collaborate to help support these 7 grandfather teachings. That is one of the driving forces behind what we do, is to help enable not only us as individuals who pass it on, but to our children and their grandchildren, to strengthen our tribe and bring back those very important traditions, what we nearly lost as a result of the government removal of our tribes to out west. Wild rice has been associated with the migration of the Potawatomis. We do the wild rice, grow it, teach the traditions of it, gathering it and bringing it back, cooking it, preparing it, getting it ready for ceremony. Most of the time we get 15 to 20 people a year that come in, and they have fun doing it. It wasn't a family type job, it was a tribe's job to go out and forage and get this wild rice, because it's not easy to harvest and prepare. It takes coordination, takes skill. Traditional food, just one piece of food sovereignty, also involves a tradition or a ceremony to bring it from harvesting to having the feast.
Today, Native nations must navigate the demands and pressures of the outside world while striving to maintain their traditional lifeways.
The Native nations as a whole live in a double world, a world of sovereignty, having the right to govern as they see fit to ensure survivability of their nation and their traditions. Yet we have to be skilled enough and be professional enough to interact with the outside world. Knowing your history, where you came from, how you got here, has brought this tribe to this point. I will never forget that everything we do here is going not only to affect the present day elder, the middle-aged group, the children. It's guaranteeing a way of life. Traditions are passed on in the old way of verbally passing that information on, teaching hands-on how you forage and gather food and doing it in a good way and still interact with Mother Nature and achieving that balance of life.
For thousands of years, the Potawatomi in the Great Lakes region flourished by knowing what to eat, where to find it, and how to harvest food sustainably. Despite devastating challenges, traditional knowledge continues to be passed from one generation to the next through storytelling and hands-on learning.
Because it's not only just having that ability to just go out there and gather stuff, it's that overall knowledge of how an individual fits and a tribe fits into the overall big picture of Mother Nature, of taking only what you need to survive and to thank Mother Nature and the Creator for what you've gotten and the knowledge that you've obtained